So chapter 4, verse 18, it says this. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. And that's what fishermen do, is they cast nets in the lake. They didn't have fishing poles yet. Okay? Fishing poles and little tiny hooks didn't work near as well as just taking a great big net and casting it out and catching fish. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. And they were in a boat with their father, Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Now in both these stories, we have two guys that are fishing, and Jesus comes by and says, follow me, and they just drop their nets right where they're at. Now remember, those nets represent a lot of work. They had to make those nets by hand. They had to mend those nets when they're torn. They just dropped them right where they were at and followed Jesus. The two other brothers do the same thing. But they were mending their nets, working on them, apparently sitting in the boat with their father. And when Jesus comes by and says, follow me, they just do. They leave their dad, the boat, and everything. And I think what Matthew's trying to point out is not the importance. You see, Luke includes the whole story about catching a huge quantity of fish. And I can see why guys would want to follow a miracle worker. But what Matthew's trying to point out is we need to follow Jesus unconditionally. We need to leave everything behind and follow him. So Matthew leaves out details of a miracle and just points out the most important thing is these guys, when Jesus told them to follow, they obeyed and did that. Now, they could have known what they were really signing up for at this point, but I'll tell you what, I have similar experiences in my life, okay? First of all, when I was a young man and not in college, I dropped out of college, I was standing, working in a grocery store for many years. I worked there for 6 years in a grocery store, but the last 3 of which I was working as a butcher, working in a meat department. And standing in the cooler and cutting meat every day and wrapping it up in the packaging and putting it out on the shelves over and over and over again. I mean, that's really repetitive work. Very repetitious. Maybe a lot like being a fisherman who goes out and just, casts the net, pulls in the fish. Casts the net, pulls in the fish. Casts the net, pulls in the fish. Maybe sometimes cast the net and no fish. Cast the net and no fish. But they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. I can definitely relate to that kind of work. And you know what? I was ready to do that for the rest of my life. But Jesus called me. Now, he didn't walk by. I didn't hear a voice. But he called me. And I followed him. Yeah, Lisa?
I just really hope that he didn't say, I'll follow me and I'll make you a butcher of man.
No, he didn't say, I will make you a butcher of men. That would have been bad. And nice play on words, Lisa. And so Jesus was somebody who just came by and called these men. And Jesus is also somebody who came by and called me one day. And I said, I have to leave this and go. It was, for me, that job represented security, a way of life. I could have made a good living. Okay? And been a steady job. It represented comfort. And all those things. And I bet you that it means the same thing to the disciples in this story. It was their livelihood. It was their father's. In one case, it was their father's livelihood, passed on for another generation to be a fisherman. And those guys left it to follow Jesus. But they couldn't have realized the adventure that they were going to be on. They couldn't have realized that. But you know what? It's kind of like something else, though. Kind of like a story I can also tell you about real life. And for me, when I took a bunch of teenagers up into Michigan to go skiing. Now, just so you know, I'm from northern Indiana, but I never had skied before in my life. I had never gone up on a mountain and skied. Now, I had been on water skis. Even though I can't hardly swim, I was able to get up on water skis and ski. I was so afraid of falling into the water, I think that's what got me up on the skis the first time I even tried. Some guys fail many times. But I got up on the skis the first time because I didn't want to go into the water, but eventually wiped out like it normally happens. And I did learn to water ski, but I had never been snow skiing. And snow skiing represented something kind of frightening to me. As soon as I put on the skis, I realized how awkward it felt to have big long sticks on the end of your feet, and you're just kind of shuffling along trying to move. And it's very, very strange feeling that you just keep sliding everywhere. You push and you slide, you push and you slide, and you walk sideways to get places. You do whatever it takes to get places. It's a very awkward feeling. But as soon as we got to the slopes with those teenagers, they already knew how to ski. They were from Michigan. They all skied before. They all just jumped up and went off. They got on the lifts, the chair lifts, and went riding up the top of the mountain. And I figured I better go to what they call the Bunny Hill. The Bunny Hill. You know, you'd think a bunny hill might be this little tiny mountain. Well, it was a lot bigger than that. And the way to get to the top was you're supposed to hold on to this rope that they had going in a round circle, like a giant rubber band, up to a tire thing that would spin around, and you'd pull up the rope in one direction, pull it down in the other, and underneath. But you had to grab a hold of that rope and let it tug you up the mountain. Well, they call it the Bunny Hill. I call it a mountain. But it was like, 500 or 600 feet up. They'd pull you up like the length of a couple football fields. It was certainly not a steep hill. That's why it was probably called the Bunny Hill, because it wasn't very steep to come down, but it was still a long ways up. And so I went over and grabbed a hold of that rope, and as soon as I grabbed a hold of that rope, what do you suppose happened? Well, it practically yanked me out of the skis. It's what? Because it's going pretty fast, and I wasn't expecting how much faster it was going. So when I grabbed it, I wasn't leaning back enough, and it just pulled me end over end face plant right into the snow. And of course, that's not a very good start to your skiing experience, to have your face filled with snow. And I get back up, and there's all these other bunnies, the people that are just learning to ski, that are trying to get onto, and I start watching them, they're doing the same thing. A lot of them are grabbing hold and falling down. The other ones start to go, and then they fall down, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see. I'll start to watch, and finally I see somebody grab a hold of it and just ride it right up. I'm like, I see how they do it. Watch the next person. They bend their knees, okay? They grab a hold, and they lean back. Yeah, that's how they have to do it. They have to do all this, grab, lean back, bend the knees. Got it. So I went over and I grabbed a hold of that rope, and I started to go about 10 feet. It was just too fast. It flipped me over again. Right into it. This time somebody else had grabbed onto the rope behind me, and they ended up going right in the back of me. I wiped out. And they went tumbling over me, and of course it's like dominoes. We're all a bunch of bunnies, and we're all terrible. We don't know how to stop ourselves. And it's just collision after collision. And I'm like, I'm sorry, And so far I haven't even made it up the hill, but a couple, maybe 20 yards. And I've fallen down twice. And I go over and I grab a hold of it again, try and do better. And I go up a little further, fall down again, get a hold, grab a hold again, go up a little further, then the girl in front of me falls down, and I run into the back of her. And she says, oh, she's sorry, and I'm like, I'm a professional, it's okay, I've been there, done that. Yeah, of course, if she'd been watching me, she'd know that I had done that already 4 or 5 times. And she didn't know that, of course. She thought I might have known what I was doing when I came up and hit her in the back. But anyhow, I finally got to the top of the Bunny Hill. No, that would be a lie. You see, they had a halfway point up the Bunny Hill that you could stop at and ski down. And I decided to stop at halfway because it was taking me forever to get to the top. So I let go of the rope and got off at the halfway point, kind of went sideways, lined up my skis, pushed off, and started going down the hill. And at the nice, slow pace, I just kind of glided down. It was like tipsy, but I made it down to the bottom, and I realized I don't know how to stop except for one way, and that is to fall down. So I fell down and wiped out there at the bottom of the Bunny Hill after going just a short ways. Now this had taken me, I'll bet you, at least a half hour to get to the halfway point of the Bunny Hill and fall down multiple times. To come down, it will take about 30 seconds. And I'm like, oh, this is just going to be terrible. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to be sore. I'm going to be broken. I'm going to be bruised. And all this just to go up halfway the Bunny Hill. Well, as happens, the way a lot of hills are arranged at these places is they all come down into one central area from different hilltops. There's different heights. And they come down and end close to the same area. And where the bunny hill was, at the very end, at the bottom, off to the right was another place that ended right after a jump. It was kind of a ravine that people come up a hill, and then they would go over the top of it, probably 20 feet high, and then they'd land on the surface and come down and stop. That was the very ending. And I was like, wow, I was looking at that, and what caught my eye was the sound of, Yahoo! And here comes, of all people, the pastor's kid, 18-year-old Matt Brenner. He had just gone airborne, landed, came down, skied around, saw his youth pastor, Todd, and said, hey, Todd, isn't this great? Now, he had gone all the way up to the top of the highest mountain, the hardest one, the one that they call, I don't know, they call 5 stars or some kind of rating, The one I went to, the Bunny Hill, was like half star. It was not even hard at all. He'd already gone all the way to the top of the big one. Come all the way down in the time it took me to go up halfway to the Bunny Hill and come down. And he knew what he was doing. He knew how to ski. And I was like, he didn't realize that I had been a pathetic mess. But when he said, isn't this fun? I'm like, no, man, I just finished the Bunny Hill. And it took me forever. I can't get this stupid rope to hold me upright. He goes, oh, stop wasting your time with that. Just come with me. Sound like words you're familiar with? Come, follow me, said Jesus. Right? Well, Matt Brenner was not Jesus, and he was not even very saintly most of the time. But Matt Brenner did know how to ski. And believe me, I was ready for a change. Do you think those guys that were mending the nets and those guys that were fishing day after day were ready for a change? You see, sometimes Jesus catches us at just the right time when we are ready for a change. We need something new. We're tired of doing the same old, same old. We need a little more adventure in our lives. And believe me, after seeing Matt do what he'd just done, come flying over a ravine and land and all that stuff, I don't think I was ready to do that. And I told Matt so. I said, Matt, I don't want to do that. I know I can't do that. I can't go in the air. He goes, don't worry. We'll do another hill. But let's go get on the chairlifts and go to a real hill. I'm like, okay, but is it easier than the ropes? He goes, oh yeah, it's a lot easier than that rope pole. Don't worry about that. Yeah, that's nothing. Let's go to a real hill. So we got on the chairlift, and the chairlift comes around you and catches you right above the knees and just kind of lifts you up, kind of just jump backward into it, and it picks you up and takes you up to the top. Not hard at all, only you start to get pretty high sometimes and you're looking down and realizing there's nothing in front of you. And if you wanted to slip out of there, you could go, ah! And so if you're afraid of heights, it's not the way to go. I was okay with it though. I realized I could sit back in the chair and it wasn't going to fall. But because there were so many other people doing it too. But then, of course, it gets to the top of the hill, and it comes around a little curve and turns around and goes back down. And I'm realizing right now, I'm telling him, Matt, what do I do when I get up? He said, oh, don't worry about it. There's a little hill that goes downhill from there to help you get off and get out of the way. I said, oh, good, okay. So at the very top, I noticed, yes, there sure enough is about 10 feet going down and away from that. So I got my skis off and jumped off the seat as it continued to go around. And I went this way. And of course, it's only 10 feet, but it just wiped down right there at the top of the hill. And just only 10 feet. And Matt's standing there looking at me like I'm pathetic. And he's like, well, good try, Pastor Todd. That's what they called me, Pastor Todd. Although one guy called me Pastor T. I like that better. But anyway, it sounded cool. All right, well, Pastor Todd was looking pathetic, and he showed me, he said, come along with me this way. Just push with your poles, your ski poles, and follow me. So I followed him, and I pushed in a very flat area at the top of the hill. And then he said, now, This is how you stop, because I can notice you don't know how to stop. You point your toes together. It's called snow plowing.